to open up the video as well, but I'll probably mute the audio because it'll be really confusing for me hearing you on here and then hearing you
No
a couple
worries.
seconds later on the stream.
Um, let's see. Did the stream start? Hello, hello. Okay, I think we're actually on, so it's always a little awkward. Hold on one more second, just making sure the sound is working. If anybody's on right now, let me know if our sound is okay. The game sound is off right now, so give us 1 minute. We'll begin. All right. And sorry, just out of curiosity, do you want me to call you Doc Ock? Do you want me to call you Levi? Levy? Hello?
Hello? Are you talking to me or?
Oh, yes, you, yeah.
Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. I was turning the sound down on this on the feed because it was interfering with everything.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, what name would you be prefer to be called by?
You can say Doctor Octoroc, or you can use my real name. It doesn't matter, but you can call me Doc or Doctor or whatever.
Okay, cool,
That
cool.
works too.
Alrighty. So hello everybody. We have just started. Hello. And yeah, so if this is your first time, this is the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences stream. We put on stuff like the DICE Awards, the DICE Summit. We are not related to EA DICE, as everybody always asks me. And usually every week on Tuesdays at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we play games and we talk to various people around the gaming community. And this week we have Doctor Octoroc, or Levi, Levy. Which one? Which way should I go there?
Levi.
Levi. There we go.
Yeah, like the jeans. I get everything though from Levi to Levy to Levy.
I mean,
Everybody
yeah,
gets it
I
wrong.
understand. My last name is Wee, and so everybody calls it a ton of different things because they can never pronounce it. So, but thank you for coming on. We really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, sure thing.
And for people that don't know who you are, and this was also a Twitter question from, I believe, Angel, could you give a little bit of background about what you do and what your work is?
Yeah. Well, obviously, it's for anybody that's seen it, it's inspired by classic video games. Pretty much, as long as you can see pixels, that's the kind of material I like to work with as far as graphics go. And part of that is that pixel to me is kind of like an abstract art form. It's building blocks. I guess you could compare it to cross stitching or other art forms that use a grid based system. But for me, as much as I like the aesthetic appeal of making something look, the way you want it to look with blocks rather than lines, or I guess you would call it an easier method. It's challenging, so it's fun for me in that way. But it's also nostalgic for me because it reminds me of the old video games, and I grew up playing them, and that's definitely a huge part of it for me as well. So most
Nice.
of my work will show pixels at as large a size as the medium will allow, and it'll have a lot of influence as well from either gameplay or stories of classic video games.
And you also, so that goes both to pixel art and to chiptune as well, right?
That's correct, yeah. And with the chip tunes, as often as I can or I'm able, I like to use the actual hardware from the system. So when I create a chip tune that sounds like a Nintendo game, I use an actual Nintendo sound processor to do that.
Nice.
So make it as genuine as possible to the original.
And the reason people are wondering why we're playing Super Mario Crossover, which is available on browser by Exploding Rabbit, I believe. Um, Levi, I'm just gonna call you
Yeah,
Doc Ock.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Doc works.
yeah. You told me that you were inspired, of course, by a lot of these older games, and so could you tell me a little bit about which games that you played back in the day that you really enjoyed, and some of your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I very well remember the first video game I played. It's funny, there's a lot of childhood memories that I have a hard time piecing together, either visually or the audio from it. Audio is usually a bigger call to memory for me, just because I've been playing piano my whole life basically since
Hmm.
I was 5 or 6, and I play by ear. So a musical cue or a certain sound, those are the things that really stick with me. Whereas the visual aspects of interactions often, are forgotten more easily. So
Yeah.
the music of video games has definitely had the greater inspiration on my music in the past. When I was younger, it wasn't until I was pretty well out of high school that I really started getting into pixel art. I mean, it's something I've always done just for fun,
Mm.
but as far as doing it on the scale that I do it now or have been doing it for the past couple of years, that didn't start until I was a little older.
Mm.
But going back to your question, and just to put, as a side note, I do go off on tangents a lot. So you'll ask me a question, and I may very well answer the next five questions you have for me.
It's all good.
Just because I like to tell stories as well. So part of it is getting a lot of information out there so that whoever's listening can get a bit, a wider understanding or a better understanding of where I'm coming from.
Mm.
But anyway, so going back to your question, um, my first video game memory would have to be Venture for the ColecoVision, and it was a system that my grandfather had when my brother and he's 3 years older than me, so I guess we were probably 4 and 7 at the time, maybe 3 and 6. I don't know how old I was, but young enough to hold a controller and kind of understand the interaction between that and the screen and the graphics that were happening there, but not old enough to really be able to appreciate it as a game or as an entertainment, for its entertainment value the way that my brother was.
Mm.
But my grandfather actually worked for a plastics manufacturing plant that made the cases and other parts for ColecoVisions. So I don't
Mm.
know if that's why he got one. I don't know if he got one, as a perk, or if he just saw the product and thought, "Oh, my grandkids might like this." And but he ended up getting one for us. But even before that, I remember playing it at his house, and so Venture was like the first game that I remember playing, and it was for anyone who's never played it. It's about as basic as you can get on Atari. That's not Pong,
Mm.
and it was basically you're just like an archer roaming these dungeons, and it was, to the best of my recollection, it wasn't like level based. It was just point based, and it was one of those kinds of games where you just cycled through the same group of levels over and over again and fought enemies, collected jewels and
Mm.
treasures and stuff like that. And I remember almost a sense of like being terrified when certain enemies would come out. I mean, however primitive the graphics were, it was a combination of the interaction with it for the first time in my life, interacting with something that was being displayed on a screen,
Mm-hmm.
with the musical or sound cues that were happening in the game,
Mm.
and so that stuck with me. There were plenty of other games on Atari and ColecoVision that I got into as well. Jumpman Junior was another one that really stuck with me.
Nice.
Um, um, and then the next system we got was Nintendo, and that was another one. Again, my grandfather got for me and my brother, and my parents were like, "Oh no, this is bad. They're gonna rot their brains." All that other stuff that probably every kid in the '80s growing up heard their parents say.
Mm.
So we had to do a lot of that, and but at one point in time, my brother got Legend of Zelda, and I think it was one of those deals where you subscribe to Nintendo Power and get it, or you buy the game and get a subscription to Nintendo Power with it.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, my mom took an interest in it, so she started playing it, and the next thing we knew, we couldn't play our Nintendo for like 6 months because she insisted on playing through the entire game, and it got to the point where my dad was getting angry because he was like, "Oh man, I lost her." She'd rather be playing that game than doing anything else. Almost like he was making dinners, he was cleaning the house. It was actually really hilarious looking back.
But it was interesting though, right? Do you think that she was interested by because she just enjoyed the gameplay, or because she saw that you guys are really enjoying the games yourselves?
I think in a way the game surprised her. Up to that point in I mean not just her life, but I mean as far as like the video game culture was concerned, like games were just a waste of time. Like there wasn't the kind of entertainment or production value there is to them today.
Mm.
They're not that kind of uh, they just don't bear as much weight in any market or educational use or anything like that. They were simply just a toy,
Mm.
and most toys you play with for a small amount of time and then you're done with them, and that's what toys are good for the most part, for kids.
Mm.
But I think there was something about the Legend of Zelda that caught her eye or her imagination, or whatever it was. It was the open world adventure of exploring, and it was kind of like, oh, this is like actually like you know, almost a brain teaser of sorts. It's almost a useful way to stimulate the mind and to get my kids thinking and get their imaginations going because
Mm.
she was an artist, so she was always pushing that for us. She always wanted to encourage us to draw and make music and do anything creative really.
Mm.
And my dad was more of the book smarts type, the educated, year shy of the doctorate, got teacher, professor of English or sort of stuff. So anyway, so
Mm.
it was always kind of a match between them. But our video game fate was kind of linked to those discussions they had. But in the end, she kind of got her way, and I think they're both pretty happy about that. Or my dad is really happy about that now.
Yeah. Interesting. To go to a quick fan question, it's a tangent in a way. Mr. Zev on Twitch asks, um, have any studios complained about using their characters or assets in any of your work in the past or currently?
Well, a lot of the work I do, I mean, it's possible that I just don't know about it because a lot of the work I've done is work for, content aggregators like College Humor or various YouTube channels. So, in the case that any complaint was filed or any cease and desist was issued or anything like that,
Mm.
I wouldn't have seen that or known about it unless the client told me about it. So it's possible. I personally got a CAD from Joss Whedon's lawyers when I put the Doctor Horrible animation out.
Oh, really?
And it was one of those situations I was talking about it with friends, and they're like, "That doesn't seem like the kind of thing Joss Whedon would do. Like he's one of the biggest appreciators of fan art of
Mm-hmm.
his. Like he appreciates those that appreciate him. He's that kind of person."
Yeah.
Um, and at the time, I had a number of people involved with Doctor Horrible, tweeting my stuff and talking about it, and they were all really happy to see it. NPH posted about it, Nathan Fillion, I think Zach Whedon or whichever of the Whedons runs the official Doctor Horrible Twitter
Mm-hmm.
account. Uh, and then so I actually got in touch with Marissa Tantrin or Tanturian. I honestly don't know how to pronounce it to this day, and I've never figured it out. But she was one of the writers,
Yeah.
and she's married to one of the Whedon brothers.
Yeah, I
And
believe. Yeah, I believe. Not Joss or Zach, but there was another one. I can't remember the name right now.
Jed,
Jed. There we
yeah,
go. Yeah.
Jed Whedon. So anyway, yeah. So she at some point, um, like tweeted at me something like, "Oh, you're an effing rock star" or something. When the whole thing was blowing up, I was like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
I was totally like starstruck because like she's not the biggest star, but she's one of my favorite like writers on the scene. Like she's written for a ton of stuff. I like like Dr. Harlow obviously, but she also wrote for Spartacus
Yeah.
and some other things I'm into. So it was kind of cool having her tweet that. So anyway, so I kind of when I got the CAD, I kind of looked to her. I just kind of tweeted. I was like, hey, so I got a CAD from Justice Lawyers.
Mm.
Just curious, if this is something that he is behind, or if it's just his lawyers looking out for his intellectual, interests,
Mm.
because that's what lawyers do, and you can't fault them for it.
Yeah.
And she had a response pretty much akin to like, "What? That doesn't sound right. I'll look into this." So that was a fun experience. Like however brief of an interaction with somebody that actually worked on the project that I was creating this fan art for, and it's
hmm
always something that any artist loves to experience.
And just to, I guess, end the story there. What happened in the end for that? Was everything okay? Did everything turn out?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was one of those things. That basically, the CAD said something to the extent of, we have reason to believe that you're attempting or have attempted or have already, you know, made money from characters that are intellectual property of Joss Whedon, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
And to that extent, I mean, I had a donation button on my page, and it was one of those things where like I'm creating this art, and I have if you like the art, feel free to donate towards whatever money I might put towards software or hardware in the future to keep creating these kinds of animations.
Mm.
And it was kind of like just a way to support what was a hobby at the time. And it was something where it definitely took time away from work, so I couldn't afford to do it as much as I wanted to do it in order to do it full time and to really put a lot of time into making a bunch of great animations. And at the same time, it was something I was like, it would be nice if I could do this full time. So
Mm.
In the end, I just took the donation button down. I don't know if that's what stopped the lawyers or if Joss Whedon ever at any point heard about it, found out about it, did anything about it. That's
Yeah.
all unknown to me. I can make all kinds of assumptions, but it doesn't do any good because, as far as I'm concerned, I just complied with the CAD and called it a day because that's the smart thing to do in the end.
Yeah, I understand. And for people that maybe, since you described your work, could you describe maybe some of the examples of things you've worked on in the past that maybe people are familiar with?
Well, I think the of all the videos I've done over the years, the stuff I've done for College Humor has definitely had the widest audience just because they have the biggest reach of all the clients I've done work for.
Mm-hmm.
And of those videos, the Game of Thrones video probably has the most views. So
Yeah.
um, that would probably be the best example. Is basically it's a 16-bit RPG style version of scenes, select scenes from Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
almost as if they're being shown from a game, a theoretical game created with the intellectual properties from the show, just kind of poking fun at the things about the show that either don't make sense or are just humorous in the video game like contexts, and that's pretty much all the videos I've done for College Humor.
Ah, okay.
Uh, but it's just the Game of Thrones one is probably the most popular one, the one that most people are most likely to have seen.
And I'm very curious in terms of the creative process. Like, how do you come up with those ideas, or do they approach you with maybe a template, and then do you make something out of it, or how does that work?
Well, they write pretty extensive scripts. I mean, they don't go so far as to say that we want it to look like this game or we want this music. Once in a while, they'll ask for a specific musical cue, but for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, they kind of leave it up to me to decide what things look like, what tracks from the soundtrack, or what kind of music I compose for the animations, and how I go about all that. And there's a lot of cases where almost every single video I did for them specifically, I've seen the show, and
Mm-hmm.
most of them I was either all caught up or had seen the entire series if it was already concluded.
Yeah.
The only exception to that was like The Wire. And when I did the first Game of Thrones animation, I hadn't even started watching this show yet, so I actually had the whole most of it spoiled for me, or at least the main stuff spoiled for me, because I had to read the script to give them an estimate and say, okay, here's how much it, it might cost you guys. So that was kind of unfortunate for me, but whatever. I still appreciate it. It's not a big deal. But what was the question again? I'm sorry, I
Oh,
got
it's
broke up.
okay. And just in terms of the process, like I guess you described a little bit about, they give you a script or they give you,
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah. I mean, for every one of those animations, they always gave me a script. So as far as the dialogue and what scenes they wanted to spoof or wanted me to recreate, those were always in the script.
Hmm.
But informationally, they gave me a lot of artistic license to kind of add some things in myself. There were a lot of animations that I added a line from the show. They're like, oh, we like that, we'll keep that in there. And
Yeah.
I mean, generally, I submitted a first cut, a week or two before they wanted to post it, and so anything they didn't like, they could cut. If it was a little too long, like they would cut some things out, or
Hmm.
send me notes and whatnot. So the process is usually just me taking the script and adhering to it as closely as I can, while still putting as much of my own take. Everything from the art to the music to some of the dialogue and some of the concepts. Um,
Hmm.
you know,
Uh,
more of a contributor to the effort, I guess you would say.
yeah. I guess going on along that line, are most of the works you do, are you fans of the project, or is it I guess a mixture of, you're getting assigned this work and you're getting assigned different things. Like I know Dr. Horrible, I think you did it on your own basis, right? And so.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's kind of what started it all. That was just a fan project that started as a small thing and then kept escalating, and I kept adding to it, and I got to the point where I was like, I'll just do the whole thing. Why not? Just recreate
Yeah.
the whole damn thing. But normally, um, I totally totally forgot the question already.
Oh, it's
So
okay.
I'm so bad at remembering things.
Nah, it's
But
all good. Yeah, just I guess it's a balance of um, the things you do make in video form. Are they things that you are fans of, or are they a mixture of things you're assigned? Then are you a fan of some of them?
I mean, for the most part, everything that they choose for that any of the clients have done, any subject matter or any style that works for it. It's all stuff that's of interest to me because it's the kinds of people that are going to appreciate a video based on a TV show that looks like a video game are the kind of people that well are like me. I mean, that's why I do it because I like it. So
Mm.
it's kind of like it's almost like I kind of tapped in on this niche that obviously plenty of other people were doing it already, um, but I just like I put something into it that a lot of people don't take the time to do, and that's the stuff that you're never most people are never going to notice. Most people are never going to notice that a character's walking animation is that everything lines up as far as like looking like a video game. It doesn't just look like a video game; it all
Mm.
operates like a video game as well. So a lot of for a lot of the work I've done in the past, and especially with Doctor Horrible, I was like, okay, it has to look like it actually is being played on an old system. Like I want it to look like that, so I used the right amount of colors.
Mm.
The fade in, the fade out was all done manually with color replacement instead of overlays because the original Nintendo couldn't do overlays.
Mm.
So to that degree, I kind of tapped in on this niche of like recreating video games to a certain extent that they're believable as screenshots or um, captures from a game, and then applying that to like a modern day thing. Like, so okay, what if this modern day thing was back in the day,
Mm.
around back then, and turned into a video game? What would it be like? And so they kind of saw that and they're like, oh, let's basically have him do that for us so we can you know distribute that content, because that's what we do. What a site like College Humor does. They hire people or have in-house people create art or videos or music for them, and they distribute it around the web. And
Mm.
it's a great model, and it works because artists get paid fairly. I got it was the first good paying gig I ever had. I actually had a client right before then that really like screwed me over big time with the payment and stuff. But I was a little
Mm.
ignorant. I was kind of excited to get some work that wasn't me just doing stuff for fun. So it kind of I learned some valuable lessons that day.
No, and for
um,
sure.
but for the most part, I've always enjoyed every video I've made for them. Especially there are a few that I wasn't terribly fond of the content, like the subject matter that we were creating, but it didn't
Mm.
change anything because it's still always fun to take something and put it into the form
Mm.
of an old style video game animation. That's always an enjoyable thing for me. So it's
Mm.
yeah, I would say I've always enjoyed myself as long as I've been doing this kind of work.
And so you work with a lot of different types of mediums, obviously, spanning a lot of different retro consoles. How do you do the research? Like, do you just boot up the old system, then you just compare and contrast, or what's your process?
Well, to some degree, I do look into the technical limitations of the system,
Mm.
um, and there's a lot of documentation on that on the web, so it's pretty easy to find that. So, for example, Nintendo's one of the best examples because Super Nintendo was such a giant leap ahead of that, technologically speaking, as far as what it was capable. I mean, it could do virtually do 3D.
Mm.
Like, I mean, it didn't actually do 3D, but it could stretch 2D images to give the appearance of 3D, and that's something that Nintendo, the best Nintendo ever had was repeating background sprites for racing games that basically kept the same straight line in a road and occasionally twisted it.
Mm.
Um, but it's one of those things where the original Nintendo system, there were so many limitations that back in the day and even now people don't think about technical limitations. Like now we're more concerned with technical specs because in the mind of the current generation gamer, we think, oh well, if it's got a better processor, it's gonna be faster. If it's got higher color count or a better resolution, if it's HD, it'll look better. These are the things that we think about and we judge games based on that. But back in the day, there
Mm.
wasn't really anything to compare games to. They all had similarly crappy graphics. As much as I love them, they are crappy to a degree. I'll admit that much.
Mm.
As far as as good as they become, but nobody really thought about why that was. Like nobody really considered like, oh, that's because the processor can only handle this many sprites on screen at a time, or each sprite can only contain this many colors in a single sprite, or you can only have so many items on the same line before one of them starts blinking in and out of existence. And there's all these things, I mean, glitches you see in games. These are all, technical limitations, not necessarily programming errors. So that's something that I definitely consider when I'm doing an animation. Is okay, like, and I definitely push the boundaries, and I definitely do things. I don't take it to such a degree that it's exactly but I got to draw the line somewhere because
Hmm.
if I put too much thought into it, I won't be able to concentrate on other things. Like I'm only one guy making these animations, doing the soundtrack, and I have a couple months to do it. So
Mm.
I gotta pick and choose my battles, so to speak. But I do put in the time to make it look as good as anybody's will look, because that kind of attention to detail is important to me in the work I do. And
Yeah.
like I said before, a lot of times people won't even notice that, they won't see it. It might subconsciously, they might think like, oh, that was really good, and they might have on some level, you know, factored in one of those things that I made that I did that most people don't actually see really, but it,
Hmm.
it's it's not a matter of them actually noticing and saying, "Oh, he did this thing. I noticed." It's just them having a better appreciation for the work I do because I put that time in.
Yeah, and it's a small appreciation of detail that I think that makes your work so fascinating to watch all the time. And I guess out of curiosity, you said a couple months for each project, or does it vary in terms of the complexity and the scale of the project?
I mean, it roughly works out. Um, I mean, a minute long animation, for example, might take me 2 weeks
Hmm.
to a month. I mean, it depends on a lot of factors. The college humor animations, as example, I'll stick with them. Generally had the same number of tracks to compose, generally had the same runtime, the same
Hmm.
number of scenes, the same number of backgrounds to create. So it's one of those things where if there's an animation that has a ton of backgrounds, each one of those backgrounds might take me half a day to draw.
Hmm.
Or each character might take me an hour to draw a complete set of animation sprites. And I mean, in the end, the actual animating of the objects around the screen is the least time consuming
Hmm.
part of one of those animations, with the exception of the dialogue boxes, because there's all these dialogue boxes popping up, and going back to like having that attention to detail. I like to make them pop up in the same relative place in relation to the character, or on an even like maybe like 16 by 16 tile spacing. So it'll always pop up at
Hmm.
some multiple of 16 across, or from top to bottom on the screen, because that's the way they did it back in the day. They worked on a tile system, so they would have these things appear at certain coordinates,
Hmm.
and that's one of the things that I like to do. So that obviously makes things take a little longer, because I'm going through and looking at the numbers of these things, like the coordinates of where they are on the screen, and saying, okay, yeah, that's where it needs to be, and
Hmm.
making things move consistently, so they're always at a whole pixel on the screen, because the animation program works on a coordinate system, but they don't work with pixels. It's a vector-based program. Flash is used to dealing with vector art, so when you, for example, have a character walk across the screen, he has to go, X number of pixels every X number of frames. I won't go too into it. It's just like kind of boring technical stuff, but there's a certain way that it has to be animated that takes longer in order for him not to kind of blur between whole pixel coordinates
Hmm.
on the screen, because when he's being displayed at like 1 to 1 pixels. So if you go in between those two pixels, the way that the it's going to render that, and the way that the computer's going to display that is like kind of blurring the difference between the two whole
Hmm.
pixels. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And so hold on, sorry. Oh my gosh. I'm playing through level 2 right now and it's kicking my butt. So
Yeah,
it's
I've
not.
I've seen you fall into quite a number of pits.
Yeah, I know. It's harder than it looks, as they always say.
Oh
Um,
no, I bet it is.
um, I know that you worked on a lot of videos. Have you ever worked on any games by any chance, or any of your work has been in any games?
Unfortunately, no. Oddly enough, I haven't gotten any. Oh well, actually, I mean, yes and no.
Hmm.
I created a soundtrack even before. It was either before the Doctor Horrible thing or right after
Hmm.
I put the first act up. I had a guy that was entering a contest, to basically to get like a license or a grant to create a video game. So the basic idea of the contest was you create a kind of a beta of the game, and you put together a script or whatever was involved. Basically they would choose a game they liked, and they would give that person everything they needed to create it
Hmm.
for whatever platform. So I had him approach me about doing a soundtrack for the game, and it was an 8-bit style game, so that was fun doing a completely original uh, score basically, which is something that I don't do often, as
Mm.
you might have guessed, doing all these animations based on other things. It often calls to have musical cues from the actual show to go with the theme. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always nice to have a slight deviation like that, so I can do something a little bit more creative, I guess,
Yeah.
by doing something completely original instead of just kind of arranging someone else's work.
But you definitely prefer creating the videos and creating these like parodies and creating these kind of videos?
I mean, I like doing both, to be honest. I can't say I like one better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing both.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. I like having both out there to do. So and while it wasn't necessarily a game, there was another. I had a firm that was doing an advertising campaign for Axe body spray
Mm-hmm.
a while back. Approached me, and they basically wanted to make an 8-bit game uh, that would kind of pop out in a banner ad online that
Yeah.
would show on different sites. So I didn't create the game for that, but I did create all the sprites and backgrounds, and I also created the music that went along with it.
That's
So
cool.
I guess that counts as a game, even if it wasn't like a platform game or anything like that.
Mm. I guess in terms of one of your dream projects or maybe an upcoming project, do you have anything that a big passion project that you want to do, or is there something that you want to work on?
I mean, I definitely one of my goals is to have my work in a feature
Mm.
film. I remember when I around the time that I first started doing pixel art and starting to get serious about making a living off of it, or at least having some work get out there and spread around. And for the most part, I just wanted to create things and get people to see them, and I was curious what people would think, and I wanted to create things that people would like. So I had to test the waters at some point.
Mm.
But when I was first getting into that sort of stuff, that was when Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out,
Yeah.
and so I went and saw that. I had a friend that had like an advanced screening ticket, and she offered to give it to me and my brother. We were so excited to go to that thing. Um, but I remember like my first thought in the theater was when the Universal logo came up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an 8-bit Universal logo. I was like, oh man, I would have loved to do that. And no offense to the artists that did it, because they did a fantastic job. I guess I just had a different vision or a different way that I would have done it
Mm-hmm.
more crude, to be honest with you. Like,
Yeah.
um, I was just like, man, I wonder how much they got paid. I was like, I totally could have like done that. So that's kind of what put the idea in my head, or at least got it churning. So it's one of those things where um, you don't really get the idea from the experience, but the experience takes this idea that you might have had anyway and says like, hey, look, if that guy can do it, you can do it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where that took me. So
And
I
yeah.
the closest I came was a documentary called Stripped,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically about the history of comics and the transition from print to web. And so I did a kind of I guess it would be a series of shorts. It was more of a short, but they kind of cut it in with some interviews with comic artists, and it was basically a video game the goal of the game was to go from starving artists to successful comic book artists,
Mm.
and so it kind of followed this just kind of generic comic book artist looking guy as he went on his quest and did all the necessary steps in between, uh, you know starting with giving your strips away for free, and then ending with building a huge fan base and monetizing a website where you post these comic strips. And so that was a really fun project because the guys that hired me were really excited about having me on it, and that's a great feeling, having somebody that likes your work so much. They're like, oh man, we can't wait to see what you come up with, and then
Yeah.
everything you send them, they're like, this is awesome, just one little thing like to change, and that's it. Versus someone that's like, oh, let's try this instead. It's nice to have a client who either knows what they want
Mm-hmm.
or is 100% trusts what you are going to do for the project. Anything in between, it can really be a damper on any art related work. Nobody wants a client that just wants you to keep creating things until you create something that they like. Like, they have to either know what they want, so they can tell you what they do, or they have to let you run with your vision and go with that.
Yeah. You don't want too much control. You don't want to be controlled too much by to hamper your creative vision, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that. It's either like have one way or the other. Either let me have my creative vision, or tell me exactly what you want, and I will make it look as good or sound as good as my abilities allow me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's why you hired me to make something look and or sound good.
Yeah.
So whether that comes from you have a vision and you just don't have the capabilities to do that on your own, or you see my work and you're like, I like exactly what you do. Do exactly that with this idea that I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So either way, I'm fine working. But I guess I would prefer having complete and free reign over a project, over an idea, and that's always a good place to be because not only are you able to exercise as much creativity as possible and kind of take a few risks here and there, and if they don't pay off, then you'll just have to redo it. It's not a huge deal. Most clients are very understanding of that because it is an artistic field where there's no science to it. It's not like, oh, you did this thing wrong. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this thing doesn't fit, with the product as well. But it's two tier. You have that, and then you also have, anytime you have a client that's giving you that kind of freedom, like it was with the clients I did the shorts for the comics documentary. They're already appreciative of your work before you even send them a single image or a single idea or a single cut. They're already on board with whatever you're going to do for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just that's the dream job. Any job that involves that scenario is perfect.
Nice. Just speaking of, I guess, favorite projects that you worked on, you talked about Game of Thrones a lot. Is that your favorite project of all time, or are there any other particular favorites that you have in your repertoire?
Well, I mean, my favorite clients are the Fine Brothers, and they're fun to work with because they're one of those clients that they do send scripts and they have a very clear vision of what they want.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I get the both the best worlds with them. Like I get the structure for me to follow, so I know exactly what they want. So there's not going to be a lot of revisions to make. But at the same time, they also give me complete freedom. So, for example, they'll send me a script and they're like, "But you can make them look however you want. You
Mm-hmm.
can make whatever game style, make it look like any game you want." Like they trust me completely with that. Like they're one of those people that have seen my work and they're like, "We know this guy's a good fit for our vision that we're gonna have. So all we have to do is give them a script that has the content we need
Mm-hmm.
for this short or this series of shorts, or mostly what I've done with them so far is the interactive YouTube videos. We did one for Saved by the Bell. We did one for Mad Men, which actually that one got taken down. That was one where they
Oh,
actually
really?
there was an issue with the copyright infringement or whatever, and it was weird because they didn't file an official complaint through YouTube. It just the video wasn't there one day. It was shady as shit. So was that's going back to your other question. That's the one time where a project I was directly involved with did have a legal issue. That horrible thing doesn't really count. Just CAD is kind of a formality. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we might sue you if you keep doing what you're doing. That's CAD. This company was like, hey, we're gonna sue you if you don't stop. Like,
Yeah.
but anyway, so I was saying like they're the best of both worlds. Doing work with them, and they're really cool guys. They're super talented, and they're visionaries.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like paint some grand picture of them. I'm not saying they're the next Steve Jobs or the next Warner Brothers, but they're close to it. They're really smart about the way
They create
they
their content and.
yeah create the content they generate. They present it. And they're really good at giving fans what they want. Like they're very attentive to their fans, and anytime there's comments coming through on the YouTube channel, they're comment responding to them as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fun guys to work for. So I'd say anything I've ever done with them, it would be on the top of the list. But the Freaks and Geeks animation or the interactive game that we did most recently
Yeah.
was probably my favorite one, if nothing else, because they had a rare opportunity to show it to James Franco and Seth
I
Rogen,
saw that. Yeah.
and their responses were just hilarious. So I mean, that made my day. Seeing like somebody, like it's one thing like okay, I created the Doctor Octoroc thing, and then like people that were in it tweeted about it and were like, oh, that was cool. But it's another thing to like actually see the person watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, I have to like imagine in my head like how long did Neil Patrick Harris actually sit down and watch that thing? Like it's over a half hour long. I really don't think he watched the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's possible that he didn't even watch it. His publicist watched it and they posted it to his Twitter account, or maybe one of his friends saw it or maybe he saw a minute of it. Who
Yeah.
knows? But I know for a fact that James Franco and Seth Rogen sat down and watched
And
the
interacted with it.
entirety, and not only that, but shows that were commenting on the show and the game, and they're like, man, this is really good. Like this is really close to how the show went. And so that was a lot of fun, and I got Seth Rogen saying that Doctor Octoroc is a dope name.
Oh,
That was
really?
by far like the best part.
That's awesome.
I was like, he thinks my name is dope. That's good for me. I'll
Checklist
stick
off.
with it. Yeah, exactly. So that I mean that was, I guess I would say that was the most rewarding project, if nothing else.
Nice.
Um,
Oh, hold on.
but yeah, I mean
Yeah,
they're I love working for the Fen Brothers. They're good
very,
guys.
very cool. For people that are interested in getting into chiptunes, pixel art, is there anything you would suggest as tips or helpful suggestions?
I mean the internet is your friend. I don't have any educational background in anything that I do now. I mean, I did go to school originally for architecture, but that that can only go so far to lend itself to pixel art animations and has nothing to do with music.
Hmm.
The music end of things. I mean, honestly, my inspiration just comes from like the original Nintendo soundtracks that I've listened to over the years, and I mean, I remember back in middle school sitting down playing through Nintendo games, and I would just just sit at the beginning of every level, record the track a couple times through, then go to the next one. I would record the soundtrack straight off the Nintendo and listen to them
Hmm.
on the bus, in the car, whatever. Like that was my playlists back then were at the old school video games. So it was kind of like I immersed myself, and just through repetition and listening to the way the composers, worked with the limited sound hardware back then,
Hmm.
it kind of becomes like a second nature to when you're doing it yourself. All the information that's there that maybe you don't understand it or maybe you don't get exactly how it works, but it's all there. It's all in your brain. It's been stored somewhere, and it's got to come out at some point.
Hmm.
So that's how it begins, and then you get to a point where you're paying attention, like I said before, to all the technical limitations of the system. So, for example, listening to a chiptune track from an actual Nintendo game, you're like, oh, why didn't they do this part in the score? Why didn't they add more drum beats or whatever?
Hmm.
And then you learn about the technical limitations, and you're like, oh, they only had 5 channels total to work with.
Yeah.
Each channel only could play one note at a time, and the first 2 channels were stuck making these sounds, and the third channel was stuck making this sound, and so on. So you get a sense of, okay, well, this makes sense now. I kind of understand, like, okay, why are the Mega Man soundtrack so fast paced, and why are there so many notes running up and down and flying
Yeah.
all over the place? Well, it's because they wanted to cover more different tones in one track, and they couldn't play them all at once. They couldn't play chords,
Hmm.
for example. They had to kind of have one line running up and down all the notes that would make up a chord, and then have the melody on the second tone channel, and they have a third channel for the bass, and then two channels that make drummy type sounds or simple type sounds. So
Yeah.
definitely learning as much about the thing you're trying to recreate in a sense, or the thing you're trying to implement in your own music
Hmm.
or graphics, whatever it might be. Learning as much about that is definitely learning as much as you can about that is the
Nice.
best way to get an understanding for it, and that will definitely reflect in your work when you start making tracks.
Hmm.
And definitely try to get your hands on the original hardware and software. There's a lot of DIYers out there that Nintendo's never going to release a cartridge that you can plug in your Nintendo and then send MIDI signals to it from a sequencer or a keyboard.
Hmm.
That's something that somebody who's a fan of video games and wanted to do that themselves, and basic knowledge of programming, or an extended knowledge of programming, did themselves, and then sold the carts. That's how I got my hands on it. So it's one of those things where it's a lot of research. I spend a lot of time just sitting at my computer, poking around the net, looking for things, learning about things, everything I can,
Yeah.
and definitely don't skimp on that. That's probably the best advice I could give.
I mean, essentially, you become an expert where you can, if you were there back in the day making these soundtracks, you can recreate them yourself at any time.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, definitely.
Yeah. Uh, I was just pushed off this. I was just pushed off the stage. It's okay. Um,
Uh,
yeah, go ahead.
I keep seeing you in this like really really crude 8-bit level. Is that an actual level, or does a level turn into that at some point?
Oh,
Like
so
like
what?
8, where if you do horrible enough, it like all goes to super pixel.
I wish it was doing that. I think essentially it's just switching over to different tiles. So, it has like a Castlevania tile, It has a Super Mario 1 style, and so
Oh, okay.
it's just switching every time I die, it switches to a different style pretty much.
I got you.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're playing the same. So right now you're on the same level four, and every time you die, it'll display it with a different tile set, basically.
exactly, exactly.
I got you.
Yeah, which is why I enjoyed this game so much. It's and I just walked off the
It's kind
stage.
of the next best thing to like a random dungeon generator or something.
That would be very interesting, though. I'm sure some game has done that, not with the Mario tile set, though. Um, just out of curiosity, you talked about, you started off with a variety of games. Do you have a favorite soundtrack, favorite composer that you really relate to, either in gaming or in general?
I mean, um, Koji Kondo is definitely one of the biggest inspirations. He did the original soundtrack for Legend of Zelda,
Mm,
and Zelda 2, and if I'm not mistaken, Link to the Past as well. I don't know what point he stopped doing the soundtracks for the Legend of Zelda, but
mm,
I mean even every Zelda game between the first one and the last one all take musical cues and tone, sounds, just the overall feel of the tracks. Like it all stems from his original creation, and to this day, we have these full on orchestral arrangements of the original theme and of the newer ones that were made with more parts to begin with. So
mm.
it's really amazing seeing the progression from a guy who literally had to program music,
Yeah.
because back in the day they didn't necessarily have the luxury of sitting down at a keyboard and playing the track into a sequencer and having those tracks laid down. They programmed the notes into the sound card directly, um, and that's amazing because you have these guys that are not only musical geniuses
Mm.
to some degree but programmers. So yeah, and how rare of an overlap is that, or would that have been back in the day versus now? It's probably not too uncommon. Probably a lot of people that have multiple interests. But I mean, back in the day, most people chose a single thing and went into it. So you have these guys that
Mm.
are excelling in two different fields, and they're doing. They just get a job making a soundtrack for a video game, or maybe they work for the company, maybe they're in house. I don't know how it worked all that
Yeah.
work back then, but they're creating soundtracks, and then those soundtracks are like, even though they may not be involved in the ongoing series and the soundtracks created for the continuation of games, but they inspired all the composers that are going to work on them.
Mm.
So it's pretty cool thing when you think about it, like how far their work reaches, even if it's not directly their work.
No, and it's like you said, like the programming aspect of it, it's an impressive feat for at the time when games are so new and music was such a new medium. It's, pretty fascinating to see how it evolved, especially throughout the years.
Oh yeah. Um, and to answer the second half of the question, I mean, soundtrack wise, obviously Legend of Zelda is probably is definitely up there, if not the number one.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how well you can see it from here, but I have like a
Oh
bunch of
wow.
Zelda tattoos. That one's upside down. And I have that one. Fused Shadow, Goron symbol. I have like the wolf from Twilight Princess. I have some Hylian on my shirt. So I'm actually in the process of finishing a full sleeve.
Wow.
I took a couple years break from it to kind of decide what pieces I wanted, and I made a rule that I have to beat whatever game the design is from,
Oh wow.
and I hadn't beat Majora's Mask at the point that I got the first couple,
Hmm.
and I finally just like a month ago got around to getting back into it and beating it. So
That's
that's
good
when I
though.
got the
You,
clock tower clock and the mask done.
yeah,
So
You beat Skull Kid, you beat everybody.
yeah, and I beat him without the Fierce Deity mask.
Oh really? Nice.
So that was kind of like I set smaller goals like that in the middle of it just to be like, I need to kind of prove myself as a Zelda fan, because honestly I haven't beaten any of the handheld games,
Mm.
with the exception of A Link Between Worlds
Yeah.
recently, because what I did is I went and got these two pieces, and I'm like, you know what, I should probably, I made another rule for myself. It's like, okay, I have to beat every Zelda game before I finish the sleeve. That's another rule. So now I'm like, okay, well, I might not be getting artwork or designs from a bunch of the handheld games, because a lot of them weren't as innovative with their design schemes the way that like Twilight Princess had the Twilight Realm like
Mm.
architecture and that like cool circuitry, organic, weird design to it.
Mm.
Ocarina, I mean, that series started all like the different symbols for like races and the sages.
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff that people use in icons, like tattoo worthy stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, Link to the Past had a couple symbols in it, but nothing grand.
And nothing to the point of where the 3D games really started bringing that more to the front
Yeah,
for it. Yeah.
because I mean, you're creating these 3D worlds that are at a resolution where you need to decide, okay, well, what's the design on the shield actually going to look like? It's not just going to be a generic cross like it was
Hmm.
in the original Zelda game. Um, so yeah, obviously I'm a huge Zelda fan. um, I got the tattoos to prove it, and I
That's
mean the
awesome.
soundtrack is absolutely amazing. Like there's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. It's they even before they had the means to set an actual orchestral score to a video game, they were creating scores that were worthy of that caliber of composition.
Hmm. And I remember we talked a little bit before that you didn't really play much out of the retro games. Is there anything you're looking forward to this year in gaming, whether it's retro of what you're doing or something new coming out?
I mean, right now I'm just working through beating all the Zelda games as I mentioned 2 seconds
Hmm.
ago.
Yeah,
I'm actually working on Phantom Hourglass right now, which most people say is the worst one in the entire series. I don't know if I agree, but it's not. It's definitely down there.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, basically any time a new Zelda game, Metroid game. Um, I mean, those are pretty much the only series that I currently follow and consistently stay up to date with.
yeah. Mm-mm.
I mean, I had kept up with Mega Man for years. Um, but really I'm a Nintendo fanboy. I mean, I'm not really a gamer. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say. I definitely played a lot of video games when I was a kid
Hmm.
and in college. And I mean, that N64. I'm surprised it didn't burn out from all the Perfect Dark me and my college roommates played on it. Me and my roommate, we joke, but it's partially true. We joke that we both dropped out of college because of Perfect Dark.
Oh wow.
It's not exactly true. It wasn't like, oh, we're gonna drop out so we can keep playing this game, but
Hmm.
looking back, it's like we definitely played that game when we should have been studying, and we weren't in like the kind of a major you could daily down. I mean, we were studying architecture. That's 16 credits a semester at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had our hands full already, and we really shouldn't have been wasting time.
But it's such a good
But
game, such a good.
but I'm really good at it. I can kick anyone's ass, and I love people get a GoldenEye because for some reason I suck at GoldenEye, but I'm really good at Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
And people who play GoldenEye will like kick my ass. I'm like, all right, let's play Perfect Dark, and they'll get all cocky, and I'll destroy them. Like, because I know every inch of every level, every weapon. Like, I know all the secondary features. I know all the tricks to like set their rope mines off faster. So yeah, it's just not fair.
That's
But
it's a pretty good way to win a bet if
oh
but
yeah, definitely. So yeah,
um,
so I people are surprised when I tell them I'm not a huge gamer, and I rarely play video games.
mm,
But what I'll do is a new Zelda game will come out, like Hyrule Warriors was the most recent one.
mm,
I mean for the console rather. Link Between Worlds obviously is the most recent one, but when that one came out, I got the game and I played through the whole thing and didn't really stop except to sleep, eat, and see friends for a couple hours a day
yeah,
until I was finished playing through once. So that's the way I kind of tackle most things. Is I like to kind of bang things out all at once, generally speaking.
mm,
So when it comes to games, I don't just play games on a regular basis or consistently. I wait for a game to come out that I really like. I buy it, I beat it, and then I'm pretty much done playing games until the next one.
yeah. I guess my last two questions for you. One is, what are you working on next, and what should we be looking forward to?
Well, right now, honestly, I mean, I'm actually doing relatively full time 3D modeling work at
Mm,
the moment.
yeah,
Basically, I got a job making 3D models of uh, designs that are being patented,
nice.
and it's kind of a new thing in the field that my firm started doing, or they're one of the few people that are doing it. Where
Mm,
basically, traditionally you get a design idea and an illustrator draws it, and they have to draw it from every angle.
mm,
They have to make sure everything lines up between the views because if there's ever a dispute over the patent and they have to take it to court, um, they, the design has to match up between all the different views
mm,
that are being displayed for the patent. So creating a 3D model of the thing ensures that that's going to be the case.
yeah.
And on top of that, it also takes things that might take 12 hours to draw freehand, with a blank canvas, and gives them a 3D model that takes me a couple hours to build.
Mm-hmm.
And all they got to do is, export that to a vector format and then stylize it. to for the patent format.
Mm.
So it's a lot of fun, and I've done a lot of 3D modeling over the years. I actually was more into 3D modeling than pixel art, but before I started doing the pixel art full time.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a good job to have. It's consistent work. But I mean, I still take projects for animation and music here and there.
Okay.
Most of the stuff I do is just kind of fun side projects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, I I got into Legos about this time last year,
Yeah.
about maybe a little earlier, um, and I basically just built a model of Philadelphia out of Legos, like on like the micro scale,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of people that were like really really liked that one, so I figured,
Nice.
okay, well, why don't I do some more stuff? So kind of working on a micro scale build of the overworld from the Link to the Past. Thought that
Mm.
would be kind of fun to try to put together. And a lot of times I'll just do something. I have so many unfinished projects. It's just what I do in my free time is I work on something, and then if it continues to hold my interest, I keep working on it,
Yeah.
and then I'll post it online and get some reactions, some suggestions. I'll see what my brother thinks. He's definitely a good go-to source for design inspiration. He's an illustrator, so
Mm.
he's my number one go-to guy if I have any questions or need any advice whatsoever.
All right. Very cool. And for people that want to follow your work or want to keep up to date with what you're doing, where should they follow you at, and what different channels do you want to shout out?
Well, definitely my Facebook is the best way to go. I do have a website, but it's more of a portfolio than anything else. It's just if somebody wants to see my work, I'll send them to my website, and they can see pretty much everything I've done concerning pixel art and original music.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as getting in touch with me and following what I'm currently up to, my Facebook page is the best way to do that. And I'm on Twitter as well, Doctor Octoroc, um, and YouTube username Doctor Octoroc. But pretty much just do a YouTube search for or a Google search for Doctor Octoroc, and all the social media sites and my website will basically pop up in the first results of that search,
Awesome.
and that'll be the easiest way to follow me on whatever platform you want to follow me on.
Oh, very cool. Well, I keep on dying in this game, but other than that, this is a very enjoyable talk. I really, loved all your work, and I thought it was really cool to really get to know, your background and how you got into pixel art and chiptunes. So thank you for your time. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. It was
Yeah.
a pleasure.
And for everyone
Thanks for having
else,
me on.
oh, thank you. And for everyone else, this will be archived in YouTube, so just hang around to our channel or follow us on at official_AIAS, and we'll post up a link probably early tomorrow. So again, every week we'll be here Tuesdays, 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And next week we'll have a special surprise. Stay tuned to our Twitter for an announcement. So again, thank you to Dr. Octoroc, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care.